Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Melissa Abache. I'm the International Student Recruitment Director at Koch University, and I'm very happy to be hosting today's event. We're going to wait a couple of minutes for all the participants who registered for today to join us. We know that you're joining from very different time zones, not only from Turkey, but in different continents. So hopefully it's not too early or too late from wherever you are to join today's webinar. So the topic of today is very, very interesting for me as well. We're going to have a sample lecture with the topic of theorizing public international law, and it's going to be delivered by one of our lecturers in the School of Law. Whilst we're waiting for everyone to join, I want to briefly introduce our panelists, but then they're going to talk a little bit more about themselves, of course. So as I said, we're very honored to have Dr. Ishil Aral, whose main research area is in public international law. She will give you, of course, more details about her training, her current research interests, and she's here with us today. Hello, Dr. Ishil. Thank you for joining us. We will also be joined a bit later by Assistant Professor Ayşeul Bura, who is the Associate Dean of the School of Law at Koç University. She's going to give us an overview of the LLM programs, not only in public law, but also in private law at Koç University. But of course, we will be concentrating on giving a bit more information about our LLM in public law. And of course, we're very honored to have today Ms. Esra Ozcan, who is the Executive Director of the School of Law here at Koç University. She's going to give us also a brief overview of the admissions process for our LLM programs for this fall 2021 period. So hopefully you will, learn something new from the lecture that we're going to be hearing, and also learn more about our programs, whether they're a good fit for your career and academic goals, and whether you might be applying to join us this fall 2021. So I think we're going to get started to make sure that we finish on time. The lecture is scheduled to take approximately half an hour, maybe a bit more, a bit less, and then we will have another 20 or 25 minutes for the overview of the LLM program and admissions process, and then we will have time 10 minutes for questions. I'm going to go through some housekeeping, practical kind of guidance for today's participants. So please know that the webinar is being recorded, and you will receive the webinar video one day later via email. You will receive an email from Zoom, and it will have the link where you can click and watch the video anytime you want, and you can also share it with colleagues who might also be interested. If you want to ask a question, and we really encourage you to ask questions regarding the lecture that you will hear today, you can type your questions on the Q&A section of your screen at the bottom, not on the chat. We'll use the chat to broadcast general messages in case we want to share any links or general messages. Please type one question at a time. Hopefully you have many questions at the end of the lecture that have interest, spark your interest. And of course, we will aim to answer the lecture and topic related questions first, and then admission related questions. The reason is that we already have other resources, both on our website and also on our YouTube channel, where we talk in more detail about the admission related aspects of the program. Okay. So with that, I'm very excited to now ask Dr. Ishil Aral to open her microphone so we can start our lecture on the topic of theorizing public international law. We're going to close our cameras, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that Dr. Aral can share hers.
Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to the sample lecture for the LLM program of Koç University. My name is Işıl Aral. I'm an assistant professor at Koç University, specializing in public international law. I mostly work and research about the theory of international law, human rights, and democratic governance. And today I'm going to be talking about theorizing public international law. Let's start. So first of all, before looking at the theory of public international law, let's do a short recap. If you want to pursue an LLM in public law, you might have already studied public international law. And let's go over it very briefly. What is public international law? Public international law provides a legal framework to govern relations between states. So it's a legal field where we have rules on the governance of relations between states. So our main actors are states. And PIL, public international law, uses as sources treaties and customs, and we also have other instruments. You might remember that the sources we have in PIL are enumerated in Article 38 of the ICJ statute, and we have treaties, customs, general principles of law, and some other subsidiary sources. And so these are how we identify what law is in international. We look at these different sources. International law derives its authority mainly from the acceptance of its binding force by its subjects. So this is something that probably differentiates international law from domestic legal fields. In international law, we have a horizontal system. We have states who are equally sovereign, and they accept to be bound by these rules. So it's a system based on the consent of states. International law does not only regulate the relations of one state with another, but also governs the relations of states with humans and juristic persons. So in 21st century, I think we can all agree that the main actors of international law are no longer only states, but we have many other actors. Apart from states, we have international organizations, we have individuals who can bring claims against their states before an international court. They have fundamental rights, and in that sense, they also have a role in international law. We also have non-state actors, so we see that progressively actors in international law over time have actually diversified. So after this very brief recap, let's say, of what public international law is, now let's look at what theory of public international law is. While the practice of public international law is concerned mostly with dispute resolution, the theory focuses on different ways in which one can think about international law. And maybe the shortest definition that we can give to the theory of public international law is thinking about public international law, thinking what international law is. During your undergrad, you might have mostly focused on the practice of international law. Probably you've looked at the identification of sources, you looked at how you interpret the sources, and then how you apply them to specific cases and specific disputes. But theory is, in a way, taking a step back and thinking about how actually we identify these sources. How do we do this interpretation? How do we create these disputes in international law? So in a second step, we can actually say that while the practice concentrates on doing law, the theory is interested in thinking about law. So rather than doing law, we will be thinking about what law is when we theorize about international law. And in that sense, finally, we can say that theory of public international law is interested in different ways of thinking about international law, both as a discipline and also as a profession. And we can also say that the purpose of looking at the theory of international law is about unmasking what international law is. So the way in which we understand what international law is actually based on a set of theoretical assumptions and presuppositions. So whenever we do international law, we cannot say that we actually look at some objective rules, some neutral rules, and then apply them to some specific cases. We actually rely on some assumptions when we do that. When we do law, we do have some precepts. We have some preconceived ideas. And in that sense, theorizing public international is unmasking these assumptions, is looking at how we actually came to have this preconceived ideas. So thinking about our ideas and assumptions and how we do law. And again, it's about unveiling these theoretical assumptions, and it will help us understand what shapes our vision of international law. So when we do this exercise, when we think about our assumptions, then we will understand how actually our ideas have been shaped and how we came to have these ideas. But why then is it important? Why is it important to think about international law when it might seem easier just to do international law? We have the rules, we have the disputes, we just apply the rules, and voila, we have a solution. But why is it important to take a step back and to think about our assumptions? Well, it's because theory is the way we look and construe the legal world in which we live. And this is how Andre Bianchi actually defines what theory is. And Andre Bianchi is a professor of international law. He says, well, we live in a legal world. This world that we live in is a legal world, and we need to think about how we create this world. And we need to look at our precepts or preconceptions about the way we create this world that we live in. And theory requires to look at these precepts, constraints, and beliefs that determine what we do in our profession and how we do it. So it's not only about doing law, but we need to think about how we do it, how we identify these rules, how we interpret a certain rule, how we resolve a dispute. And I think theory allows us to think about international law as a language. So that's a way of looking at international law that I really like, looking at international law as a language. So you don't see it only as a set of rules or as a set of sources. You see it in a broader sense. You see it as a language. So if international law is a language through which we make certain legal claims, because law is all about making certain claims, well, and if we consume international law as a language through which we make certain arguments, if we want to be a good international lawyer, we need to be familiar with different dialects. So we need to know actually how we can use this language better and what are the different ways of conceptualizing and creating this language. So this is why theory is important. Reflexivity is an exercise that is situated right at the center of theorizing public international law. We need to be reflective and think about the way we think about international law. And reflexivity refers to the capacity to critically evaluate the way in which our mode of thinking affects our work. So as I said, theory is about thinking how we come to think in a certain way, why we have certain assumptions and certain precepts. So in order to do that, we need to be reflexive in our work. Is the review from nowhere? I think that's a very good question to start when we will be theorizing about public international law. So I've been probably repeating the word thinking so many times since I started the lecture. It's because thinking is an exercise which comes from somewhere. There's no way to think or to have a view from nowhere. And I think the person who actually puts this in words in the best way is Stanley Fish. Stanley Fish is a legal theorist, and he says, we are never not in a situation. So it means that we are always situated. We are politically situated, culturally situated, ethnically situated. We always have a position in this legal world. So in that sense, it's important to reflect on this position. Where are we? Where are we positioned? What do others do, and what makes me different from their way of thinking, from their mode of thinking? So in that sense, Theorizing Public International Law is all about thinking our position in this legal world. You might be thinking, well, yes, I want to do an LLM, but actually I'm not that interested in theory. What I want to do, I want to be a practitioner in public law, and I don't think that I really need theory. Well, I object to that. I think every practitioner also needs a very sound basis in theory, because theory and practice, they are very closely related, and they might be seen as two sides of the same coin. If you want to be a good practitioner, you also need to have a very good understanding of theoretical perspectives in the legal field that you work. And in that sense, theory and practice, I don't think that they can actually be separated. Theory and practice are closely related because theory provides the framework for understanding practice. Even if you're just going to be practicing law, and some of you might want to be an academic, and in that sense you will surely need theory, but you might be thinking, well, I just want to do practice. And when you do practice, you need the skills to, in a way, theoretically think about what you do, and you need to be able to come up with different ideas, with different perspectives, and be able to situate yourself in a different position and understand other lawyers' mode of thinking. And in that sense, theory is essential also for every practitioner. And I also want to mention that international law is an art of persuasion. It's about convincing the other that you're making a valid argument, that what you're saying is actually an accurate way of resolving that dispute or interpreting that case. And in that sense, you need to have the skills to persuade the other. And in order to do that, you need to have a good basis in theory. You need to be able to critically think about what you're doing and come up with different ways of looking at the same case. Well, by now you might be thinking that we talked about how there might be different ways of seeing international law, different ways of looking at international law. And I'm sure you're thinking, well, what happened to reality? What happened to objectivity in law that we care so much about? We want law to be objective and neutral and apply to everyone equally. So is there an objective reality in law? Well, theory allows us to see different perspectives. So when we study theory, we see that we should not be so much preoccupied with actually what is reality in law, whether there is an objective interpretation of a rule, whether there's any truth in what we are saying. What's important when we do international law is being able to understand different perspectives. What are these different perspectives? What do they tell us? And how they see and interpret this legal world. Perspectivism is very broadly studied by Nietzsche, and he says that there is no absolute knowledge. And social sciences, there's no way to come up with just an absolute truth, with just one reality. And in that sense, objectivity seems quite difficult to attain in public international law. It's all about understanding different perspectives, different ways of thinking about international law. And in that sense, we can say that there is not a single world in law. Everyone, every lawyer, in our case, every international lawyer will create a different world. And in that sense, it's all about understanding what others think and how they approach a certain matter in international law. And it brings me to this very famous book, Ways of Seeing by John Berger. You might have already read this book. It's a quite famous book by art critic John Berger, who says that there are various ways of seeing things. He does that through images, but I think this is something that we can easily transplant into international law, and we can see theory in public international law as an exercise of world making. It's about how we create this world, how we create this legal world that we live in. What might be the other ways of seeing it? What might be other perspectives that allows us to create this world? You might be thinking, if there are so many different worlds, if there is so many different perspectives, if there's no objectivity, does this actually perspectivism, having all these different theories in international law, does this undermine the authority and function of international law? My answer would be no. I don't think that having so many theories, so many different ways of conceptualizing what international law is actually something that we should see as a plus in international law. We don't have a single answer in international law to legal disputes. There are many ways of seeing things, many ways of conceptualizing what international law is. And I think that's the beauty of international law, that it's so diverse and that it allows so many different ways of conceptualizing what law is in international law. But we still need to, in a way, underline the fact that theory does not mean anything goes. So when there are so many different perspectives and ways of seeing international law, it doesn't mean that you can say anything and that anything goes. Studying theory allows us actually to acquire these tools by which we can make valid arguments in international law. So what might be, we learn about different ways of seeing international law, and then we acquire these skills to make valid arguments that will be capable to convince the other party. So I want to here provide a few examples to make it a bit more concrete when we refer to theories of public international law. Here I have only 3 theories, but of course this list is not exhaustive. We might add many other theories, but I will just very briefly mention what the traditional approaches, what we mean by third world approaches and feminist approaches. So these 3 examples will show how actually there are very different ways of understanding what international law is. We'll see that all these different theories, they conceptualize international law differently, they ask different questions, and in that sense, they have different projects. First of all, the traditional approach. So the traditional approach in international law is looking looking at international law as a system of principles and neutral rules that emanate from states' will. So someone who belonged to the traditional school will say, well, international law is a closed system where we have some objective rules, and when we have a legal dispute, we can actually look at these rules, interpret them, and then apply them to the dispute in order to get a solution. And they will say that it's, well, we can identify the sources, we can either look at international treaties, we can look at custom, we can look at general principles of law, teachings of publicists, and we can identify the sources, and then after the identification of sources, it's easy to solve the disputes. And legal problems, they are supposed to have one correct answer. And this is most of the time what is called the doctrinal approach, or you might have heard also of black letter law, this traditional school in international law, which argues that in international law, we have the rules, we have disputes, there's not much room actually for, in that sense, too much controversy when it comes to resolving disputes. Let's look at another theory, third world approaches. Third world approaches to international law, you might have also heard of it as TWAIL. 12 scholars have long been engaged in demonstrating how international law has served as the tool to legitimize power imbalances. So we want to accept that international law relies on sovereign equality and that all states are equal and that they equally contribute to the making of international law. So when scholars have a different perspective, they say that international law is actually a tool of oppression developed by Western states. So they say we need to look at who actually shapes international law, who takes place in its making, and who actually has the major role in its operation. So they highlight how international law can actually be used as a tool of oppression and hegemony. Another theoretical perspective would be feminist approaches. In the 90s, feminist scholars have started to question the gender bias in international law, and they wanted to unearth the patriarchal structures of international law because they argued that the gender bias in international is actually something inherent in the system. International law is far from providing some neutral or objective rules. These are rules created by men and for men, and they've been created mostly by white Western men, and they disregard problems that usually affect women. For example, when we look at some of the questions they ask, for example, they ask, what's the role of women in the making of international law? They ask whether women are sufficiently protected from violations of inherent law. For example, they ask the question whether international humanitarian law is capable to protect women against sexual offenses. And they also ask whether international law is really neutral in its operation. And in that sense, they try to unveil the gender bias in the structure of international law. So I have actually discussed why we need theory, what is theory, and we touched upon some different ways of looking at international law. And I want to conclude by saying that I think studying theory, as I said, is important not only if you want to be an academic, but also for anyone who wants to practice public law. And I see theory as an adventure. It's I guess every theory of international is a different adventure. It's when you look at the traditional approach, it's like scuba diving, but when you talk about the feminist approaches, it might seem like you're going on mountaineering. And looking at all these different theories will be a different adventure, seeing a different side of international law and seeing how international is actually an exercise of world making and how we create this world that we live in. Thank you so much for joining the sample lecture, and I'll be very happy if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aral Hoja. That was fascinating, really. I just learned so much in in half an hour. I'm sure I just kind of glimpsed at it, and now I do want to check more some of the books you mentioned, some of the theory approaches that you mentioned, especially this third world approach, because I come from Venezuela, and I know that in academia in Venezuela there has been in the last decade or so a kind of revision of the role of the country in terms of its international law regime, and how they position the country in different treaties and in negotiation with other countries. So that was really interesting for me to hear that there's a maybe not a unified movement, but a an approach there. So with that, I would really now like to welcome Assistant Professor Aisha Gulbura, who has now joined us. She's just coming from a very important international, event, and you can share more details if you want about that event. I'm going to first share my screen so that we can go back to our presentation. So if you would like to introduce yourself, talk a bit about your research areas, the event you were just coming from, and then we will start our overview of the LLM programs.
Yes, with pleasure. Thank you very much, Melissa. Well, my name is Aisha Gulbura. I'm currently acting as Associate Dean at Koç University Law School. I'm also directing our Dr. Nusret and Samat Arsel International Business Law Research Center. I do apologize for my late arrival, but this was due to an event that we have been meaning to organize for almost, 1 year and a half now. So this event is financially supported, and generously so, financially supported by the Erasmus Plus program of the European Union. We are currently running a project on insurance law, and the European Commission and the European Union are financing us on that project. So we have just organized the second big event of that project, which will be held in the form of a series of events that will be held throughout February and in the first week of March. We are trying to publicize that on Twitter. So if you are interested in finding out more about our series of events, you are very welcome to check out HopeInEU, which is our Twitter address, which is the Twitter address of our insurance law project. So if you are interested in finding out more about our project and our project events, please do check out our Twitter account. Shall we move on to the presentation? I would like to give you some overview about why doing an LLM at Koç University. Well, there are several reasons, obviously, and what I will be mentioning now is not, of course, exhaustive. So I would like to basically start by giving some general information, an overview as to why choosing to study in LLM at Koç University would greatly enhance your career, either as an academic or as a practicing lawyer. Well, the first reason is that you will be taught by faculty members who are internationally renowned and who are dedicated to train a new generation of lawyers. If you have not yet checked our law school website, please do so after this webinar to see our faculty members and their backgrounds, and you will immediately notice, I think, that they have degrees from very reputable universities in the world, and that they are very dedicated legal scholars with a high number of good quality publications. Obviously, because we're talking about our LLM in public law program, we have full-time and part-time faculty members teaching on our LLM program. And you will notice if you check out our law school's website that some of these part-time lecturers are coming to Turkey to teach from a variety of countries such as United Kingdom, Spain, and Mexico. Moving on to another reason why, as to why doing an LLM at Koç might be a good idea for you, is that we offer an international environment to a qualified group of graduate students. So they are provided numerous opportunities throughout their studies to improve their academic skills, as well as their awareness as to contemporary legal challenges and international topics of different legal disciplines. We have a lot of agreements with several different reputable universities in the world, and our LLM students have the option to apply for these exchange programs in order to spend some time for research for their thesis or their final paper in another country. Also, one thing that might look a bit advantageous to those who are working and who will be working while doing an LLM at the same time is that the courses that we offer are modular and they usually last from 6 to 8 weeks. They're also scheduled on Fridays and Saturdays, which basically permit our students who work at the same time as pursuing the LLM to be able to attend the lectures. Shall we move on to the next slide, Melissa? Thank you. So in a nutshell, really, we offer 2 tracks in our LLM program. So we have the LLM in private law and LLM in public law. If you consider doing an LLM with thesis, then you will be required to take 7 courses, and you will have to write a thesis in the end, which you will need to finish in a year or so. And in total, in that case, the whole program will have to be complete in 2 years. If you would like to pursue a non-thesis LLM program, which is perfectly possible, then you will be required to take 10 courses and write a final paper, which would require less, if you like, research focus compared to the writing of a thesis. And in that case, the program would need to be completed in 1 year only. Now, I would like to say a few words about the thesis and the final paper, because we usually get this question. So some potential students ask the question of whether they will have the liberty to choose the thesis topic, what they would need to do in order to approach their potential supervisors. Well, the topic of either the thesis or of the final paper is obviously chosen by the students themselves and in consultation with their potential supervisors. So if the students are rather interested in contract law or in maritime law, they would need to approach the professors teaching in these areas to write their works under the supervision of these professors. And that process, in a way, gives students to focus on the field of law that interests them most. Shall we move on to the next slide, Melissa? Thank you. This is an overview of our LLM curriculum. On the left column, you see the compulsory courses that we offer in the LLM in public law program. In the middle, we have the compulsory courses of the LLM in private law program. And on the right-hand side, you see the common elective courses. So if you are enrolled in either the LLM in public law or the LLM in private law programs, you may as well elect any of these common elective courses. I don't know whether I would need to say a few words about these courses. You have already heard from Işıl Aral Hoca about her own area of law. And what I may perhaps say is that Koç University Law School is doing its best to attract the most reputable scholars to its LLM program. And we not only have very well-known and renowned academics in our academic staff, but we also have, as I previously told you, practitioners who are world-renowned, who are teaching on our LLM program. So the options that you will get once you've decided to enroll in this program, and of course, once you get admitted, is numerous, and you will also get the opportunity to apply for exchange programs, which is extremely beneficial, I think, for students. Next slide, please, Melissa. Shall I hand over to Esra at this point in time?
I can take over. Thank you, Professor Bora, and thank you,
Okay.
Professor Aral,
Thanks,
for your valuable contribution. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I would like to briefly explain you some details about the admission process that you might have most of the questions about. So we are going to take the admissions for applications for fall semester 2021, and the applications are due on 21st of June. You will have all the details you still have now on our website, and then you can apply, submit your application on our online platform, which is apply.ku.edu.tr. How we evaluate the applications are very selective, and it is very competitive. So once you apply, the shortlisted candidates are invited for an interview and written exam. And after that, based on your academic success, the admissions evaluations are finalized, and then you get an offer or the unfortunately rejections. Can we pass on to the next slide? Yeah. And the most important thing is the criteria. If you have these criteria, you can apply to our programs. Most important thing is the LLB diploma and your transcript. All candidates must have an LLB degree. Otherwise, if you graduate from a different majors, you cannot apply to an LLM program due to national regulations set by the Higher Education Council. So first of all, you should have an LLB diploma. And for two tracks, for thesis and non-thesis, there are two different GPA requirements. 2.75 is required for the with thesis program, and 2.50 is required for non-thesis program. And as our program is fully English, we need to have your proficiency, language proficiency scores. These are the scores that we accept: TOEFL, YDS, and YÖKDİL. For international students, YDS and YÖKDİL exams are based in Turkey, so you can apply with a TOEFL score. If you currently hold an IELTS score, you can still apply. However, Turkish institutions cannot accept IELTS score. So if you apply with an IELTS score and you go through the admission process and you get an offer, it will be a conditional offer, and at the end you will have to submit a TOEFL score. And there is an ALES score for Turkish applicants. ALES is an academic graduate education exam based in Turkey. So 55 is required for from Turkish applicants, but for non-thesis, you do not have to have an ALES score. These are the central exams, and during the pandemic, we are all aware of the fact that those central exams are being postponed. Therefore, if you cannot have one of these exams, you can still apply. During the pandemic, we evaluate those candidates and we give them conditional offers if they successfully pass written exam and interviews. At the end, of course, once you are able to take these exams, you take them and then submit your scores. Next, please. And one of the most asked questions is the financial aid and scholarships. This is a tuition fee for the whole program. It is not 1 year. So if you apply for with thesis or without thesis programs, The payment is the same. It's 11,000 US dollars, equals 26,500 Turkish liras, and you can pay it in 2 installments. We offer on academic merit, we offer scholarships and tuition fee waivers to our students. 25%, 50%, 100, up to 100% tuition waiver are available for successful candidates after they written, we evaluate them. The committee evaluates basically their written exams and interview. And without thesis also, up to 25% tuition waiver is available, but of course, it's very exceptional and you have to be very successful. These, as I said, these evaluations are based on your success on written exam and interview. Next, do we have any slides, Melissa? It is an upcoming webinar announcement. We have a general info session on our graduate School of Social Sciences and Humanities. If you're interested in any other programs, on the 5th of March, we have another webinar, and I'm sure Melissa will give quite information about it, or shall I go?
That's okay.
Okay.
We just wanted to give information here in case you're interested not only in exploring the LLM program, but some of our other master and PhD programs in the Graduate School of Social Sciences and Humanities. The law school also offers a PhD in private law and a PhD in public law programs. So attending this info session might be a good opportunity to hear more about the PhD programs at Koç University. You can find the details on Instagram and also, of course, on the graduate school website, and I will put the address in a couple of slides. So with that, I want to thank Ayşegül Hoca and Esra for that overview. We have started to receive some questions, so we're now going to move, I'm very much on time, which is great. Thank you so much for that, to the question and answer part session, part of the session. So we have started to receive some questions. What I would also like to remind is that I see we have several participants from Turkey. If you wish, you can also write your questions in Turkish. I'm the only non-Turkish native speaker here today, but of course, our other, our panelists today, they are Turkish speakers, so please feel free to ask or type your questions in Turkish if you wish, and they can be answered in Turkish as well. We will give a brief summary of the question and the answer afterwards. So please don't be shy, ask your questions. I'm still thinking about the lecture, to be honest. It's like I'm still processing everything, and I do have questions, but I'm not going to take up the time from participants. So we have about 10 minutes for questions. There are some admission related ones that I think we have answered, but we might, let's say, reiterate some of the information. There is a question: for the current session, do we attend physically or online? So by current session, I will interpret that you're asking the fall 2021 semester, that's the session that we are open for admissions now. The answer is we don't know yet. Hopefully in the best case scenario, the courses will be delivered on campus, where you can, interact as always with our professors in classrooms and enjoy the beautiful campus that you see on your screens there. But again, we are subject to the global situation and also the regulation from the Turkish Higher Education Council and the Ministry of Health of Turkey. So this semester, for example, the plans are to start the delivery of courses online. And if the situation improves, we are ready. So we have all the technology and the plans in place to be able to switch, to either modality fairly quickly, as it happened in March last year when we all had to go online. So unfortunately, the answer right now is we don't know yet. Hopefully it will be, face-to-face physical classes on campus. There is a question here about the merit criteria for scholarship. Perhaps maybe we can talk a little bit about from Professor Ayşegül and Esra about the written exam and the interview, because this is the main criteria for the merit scholarships. Maybe we can talk about the structure, length, the type of, what is being tried to, gauge from the applicants through the interview and the written exam.
Esra, shall I leave that to you?
Sure. So first of all, all applicants are invited for an interview to get to know them. First, it will be like the committee wants to get to know you better and your educational background, and they ask you some questions, international and comparative aspects of law. And after it is just an evaluation of your like what you've learned so far and how you assess this and these kinds of questions. It is just an informal gathering, the interviews. But when it comes to the written exam, it's a rather academic assessment. They basically, most of the time, they provide an international and comparative case, and they would like to review it, an academic paperwork. So you have 3 hours or so. For the last year, of course, we've done these exams online, and for international students, we've always assessed them through Zoom and also an online exam. So you're asked to provide an academic exam, and that's submitted to Turnitin, and then the committee evaluates them. So based on your performance in the interview and then the written exam, the committee gets to know you better, and then they make the final evaluation, and they also look at your transcripts and what courses you've taken before, and then the final decision is made. Professor Brewer, would you like to add anything on that?
Thank you, Esra. This was an excellent overview, I think. Perhaps I may just add from the types of questions that we asked in the previous year, for instance. So in the private law interviews, for instance, we asked the candidates about whether or not they know anything about international commercial terms, whether they've heard of Incoterms, for instance. That gives you an understanding as to whether the candidates are aware of the necessities of or the necessary terms that are used in international trade, or in the written exam especially, what we do is that we try to assess the candidates' analytical skills, basically. So we're not asking you to write an assignment only, but what we do is that we give you problem questions that you will have to solve, which will give us an understanding as to whether you have improved or developed analytical skills. So you, what you do is that you try to solve a problem, actually several problem questions. We ask, I mean, in the past, we asked, text-based questions as well, but we rather try usually to focus on problem solving, which you have to do anyway as a lawyer, either being a law scholar, a legal scholar, or being a practicing lawyer.
Thank you very much. I think we have covered that very well. So there was a question about the tuition fee in Pakistan currency. I have to be honest, I don't know at top of my head. So I went on Google and, checked what is the Turkish lira to Pakistani rupee exchange rate at the moment. So for the person asking this, it's, I hope I get this right. So it's 1,671,000, I'm rounding up, Pakistani rupees. I don't know if the term lakhs are also applied, but yeah, so that's roughly the amount of the tuition. And as Esra Hanum said, then again, based on academic merit, there are 25%, 50%, or 100% tuition waiver scholarships. So the scholarships do not cover other expenses such as dormitories, books, or monthly living stipends. You should find alternative funding either from for example, if you're employed, from your legal firm, or national loans for education that you might have access to, or family funds, or your own funds for that, okay? So we also had a question about kind of how to contact us, asking about a WhatsApp number. We do have a team WhatsApp number that we have set up. It's going to be shown on our international admissions website fairly quickly in a couple of weeks. But in the meantime, the fastest way to get an answer if you have any questions is via email. So in the next slide, I will put the contact details so that you can write to us. There also was a question right at the beginning, which I guess wasn't so much a question, but someone who is more interested in conducting a PhD in international law. So I didn't see a question, there. But as I said, please make sure that you check our website. The important thing is really to check our faculty member profiles to see what are they working on, what type of research lines they are currently interested in, because that will also help you see if there would be possible supervision for the specific topic that you're interested in within international law. So I see also some participants have raised their hand, but please note that we're not using that feature. We're not opening the microphones during this session. So I would kindly ask you to please type your questions in the Q&A section, okay? And I guess another participant from Pakistan has said, yes, it's nearly 1 million Pakistani rupees, which is good to know. So, yes. Okay, so we're gonna have a couple more minutes for any other questions. As I said, Turkish participants who are here with us, you can type your questions in English or in Turkish if you wish. Let's wait a couple. In the meantime, then I will show our contact details. You can find all of the information that we have mentioned today in the Graduate School of Social Sciences and Humanities website, which is at the top of the page. So please make sure that after today, you have a look at the website and start exploring the courses, the faculty members. We have information there about current students and not only from the LLM, but also for the PhD program. Let's see, I think we might have another question, but there was a question. I guess the question is how to contact professors. So the best way is, again, to check the website that you see at the top, gssh.ku.edu.tr. You find the law department there, and you can see the faculty members. So the faculty members do have their contact details available, the email address, for example. We do have some specific advice on how to contact faculty members. As you saw, for example, from Professor Ayşegül, she just came back from a huge event, from a huge project that she's organizing. Dr. Işıl Aral, she's also engaged in several projects. So these are very, generous but time poor people. So you have to really make sure that you grab their attention. If you're going to send an email about joining the program, either the LLM program or the PhD program, you should make sure that you're presenting yourself in the best way in terms of providing, for example, a very well prepared, carefully redacted academic CV, that you get to the point, do not ramble on. And that's the advice that in terms of feedback that we have received from faculty members, so that you can explain what type of or what topics or questions of research you're interested in and why do you think that professor might be interested in. And again, there is no guarantee that professors will answer. Some of them have a policy of not answering, that they might just guide you to please apply, and after you apply, they will look at your CV, etc. Other professors have a different policy of replying and saying, yes, it looks, it's informal feedback. It doesn't guarantee admission to the program because there is a written exam and a panel interview. But this is the general advice that we can provide. So yes, if you need to talk to any professors, please first go to the website, check their information, check their CVs. A lot of them are also, of course, on LinkedIn and other research sites, so you can see recent publications, and that's our advice. Okay. Okay, I think one of our participants was driving as he was listening. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, of course. Thank you for having participated. With that, I think we have now arrived at the end of our session today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Please keep in touch. As we said, usually the fastest way to get an answer is via email. So for those of you who are international applicants or prospective applicants, you can reach us at study@ku.edu.tr. If you're an applicant from Turkey, please feel free to contact Esra, who is here. She has put her email address in there. And this is, I think that's all for today. Thank you so much, Dr. Işıl. Thank you so much, Professor Ayşegül and Esra, for your time, and we will see you soon. Thank you for joining. If you want to say any last words or just say goodbye, then let's do that.
Thanks a lot for joining us, and hopefully see you again.
Thank you, everyone, and look forward to seeing you at Coach.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.